I'd rather someone be compassionate and honest with me than nice and dishonest.
So hello. Now, if you've worked with us at Unleashed Learning, you know that language matters. And language sometimes reflects what we think, and it can impact what we think. And also, it's a tool for the ways we make learning stick for everyone, the intentionality we find behind that. And that's why I really wanted to offer this Unleashed Learning TV and radio episode with my friend and colleague, Dr. Nancy Dome, to offer ways to create more compassionate dialogue with your team, within your organization, or with the people you lead or serve. Now, Dr. Nancy Dome, as you know, is the founder of Epic Education. She's the author of Let's Talk About Race and Other Hard Things. And her latest is the Compassionate Dialogue Journey, a workbook for growth and self-discovery. This is really an episode to share with your team, forward at people that you work with, and to lean in together with some ways to create a bit more compassion in our world. Here we go. Okay, Miss Dr. Nancy Dunn, welcome back to Unleashed Learning TV, my friend.
Thank you. Glad to be back, and it's good to see you.
So as you know, what we do at Unleashed Learning for the school space is we're really a new way forward for advancing teaching and learning school-wide. And we put a really advanced teaching and learning mission in place for the school or the district or network, and a very specific system where it's big enough to bring everything together. And during the journey, the Unleashed Learning journey, when the new teachers or the leaders or the experienced teachers are taking their programs, language comes up a lot. So does identities. And people start really thinking about how words matter. And they start not beating themselves up. They're just becoming really critically reflective about the language they're using. So when your new book came out about compassionate dialogue, I thought this is a really great opportunity for the audience to think about language and how to think about language for the kind of work we're doing as a community of practice. So that's why you're here.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So I want to start because if people haven't read your book yet, it's about compassionate dialogue. And I thought we could start by asking you, how do you define compassionate dialogue, or what is it?
So I would say that compassionate dialogue itself is a framework, right? It would be the umbrella to what I call the RIR protocol. And compassionate dialogue is really in the service of three things. One, it's interrupting harmful behaviors or language, right? So how do we do that, but coming from a place of compassion rather than in attack mode? And then the second way is actually, or the second purpose of it is about deepening coalitions and connections, right? So if we have relationships, part of how relationships get stronger is by having those tough conversations, right? They don't get stronger when everything's easier. They get stronger when we have challenges. And so we also want to think about compassionate dialogue as a tool to really deepen those coalitions and connections so that we can have deeper relationships, so that when we need them, they're there and they're healthy, right? And then finally, compassionate dialogue is about self-care. It's about how I make sure that I'm not stuffing my feelings. I'm not stuffing, what I need to share because I'm afraid or intimidated or worried I'm not going to say the right thing, that I am actually taking care of myself by using my voice, right? So compassionate dialogue becomes this conversation in pursuit of connecting with empathy, even when it's difficult, right?
I love when I hear you say the approach, what I think about is starting with the approach of compassion, but also I'm thinking about the self-reflection about ourselves, because it's, it's community, but also who we are as well. So can you give us, I'm always hesitant about this. It's not a strategy conversation, but it is an example of compassionate dialogue in action. Can you give us a sense of what that might look like or feel like?
Yeah, I mean, a real example, and it's, it's one that I put in my first book, Let's Talk About Race, but I think it's poignant and perfect to really get the idea, is that I had a girlfriend that we've been friends for years, and she started, I don't know, kind of just like standing me up, and the grass was always greener. So we would make plans and she would bail at the last minute. And it started to really have an impact on me. It was hurting my feelings. I mentioned it here and there, nothing changed. And then I really came to this realization that, like, one, I have a tool, right?
Mm,
And I can use this tool. And I really thought about, like, since she's not changing, then I really need to just not be friends with her.
mm,
And what compassionate dialogue did for me was it allowed me to have the conversation about needing to not be friends anymore.
mm,
So typically, our MO when we get that frustrated with somebody is just to ghost them or to ignore them, not answer. But compassion dialogue said, I'm gonna have this conversation so that this person knows why I am disappearing from their life.
mm, mm,
So I sat her down. I said, you know what? I love you. And I don't have friends who treat me this way. And
mm,
so I don't think we can be friends anymore because I've asked you multiple times to not, to respect my time, to not, do what you do. And it hasn't changed. So I just think that we need to kind of part ways. And I wish you the best, right? So we did that. And then I would say that for about 6 months, I was clear that she was out of my life. So let me back up. One, that's compassionate dialogue, right? So I did the interrupt and I did the repair. So I recognized how I was feeling. I interrupted it by having the conversation with her because she hadn't responded before. And then I repaired it. For me, in that case, was that we just can't be friends anymore. The other side that why I like this example so much is that she spent 6 months kind of, I would say, in some way, like hoarding my friendship back, right?
mm,
She was going out of her way to make contact, going out of her way to follow through and to show up. And what I saw was that she really did reflect from what I said. I wasn't trying to change her, I was taking care of myself.
mm,
Reflected, and she realized that I had a point, and so she changed her behavior on her own. So now, 10 years later, we're still friends, and we're better friends because now we have she knows what my expectations are. I set
mm.
my boundaries for what I need from a friendship, right? And so the reason I share that part of it is that I think when people think of compassionate dialogue, there's two things. One, they think it's warm and fuzzy and that it's not difficult. And I'm going to tell you, if you're having a compassionate dialogue, which means you're leaning in, it's probably going to be super hard. It's probably going
Mm,
to be super uncomfortable. And when you get to the other side, that's when you're going to get the reward, right? In the
mm,
self-care piece and how you feel. And then the other thing is that just because I said that we can't, that I don't want to be friends now, doesn't mean that if a person changes behavior, we
mm,
have to be willing to forgive each other. Like, we're going to make mistakes. And I think we're in this good bad binary that says, I'm a good person until I make a mistake and then I become a bad person. And then I'm a bad person. So
mm,
then so then we can't make up because you hurt my feelings, you hurt me, now you're a bad person and I can never forgive you. Well, that's not realistic. We all make mistakes. We're all going to hurt people. We're all going to be hurt. So if people are willing to make amends, do we have the space to give grace and to
mm,
forgive and welcome them back if they're willing to do what we need for the relationship or the friendship to continue, right? And so it really is about um grace for yourself, grace for each other, allowing people to make mistakes, knowing that that's part of our human experience, and being able to move forward. Now, had she not tried to make amends, we still wouldn't be friends, and that
mm.
would be okay, right? But it's this idea that it's just not black and white.
Makes me think from the Unleashed Learning perspective that part of the system is who the teacher or educator or leader is matters. And so
Mm,
a lot of things I'm hearing you talk about, because in a lot of the models, the educator or leader is not really in the equation because they're just delivering information. But what you're saying is, what I heard you say is you have to know your values.
yes,
You have to be connected to yourself. You
yes,
had to, and I'm if I'm putting words in your mouth, that's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm hearing you say a little bit too is this isn't, you're giving up the need to please. It's about really being congruent for yourself, but also authentic and vulnerable so they can make choices as well.
absolutely.
And sometimes contracts end, right?
Yep.
So sometimes contracts end, but you are leaning in to see if that's the case or if it can continue.
Right. And if the contract is ending, it's ending with full knowledge that it is time to end,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that sometimes we end those contracts because we're uncomfortable and it's easier, but they still weigh on us, which means that it isn't over,
Mm,
right?
yeah. So I mean, I jumped the gun a little bit, but you're saying it. What do we have to know about ourselves to engage in compassionate dialogue? Because this is really an inside out process from the way I'm listening to this. And also I've read your book.
Yeah, I mean, one, you have to be willing to just slow down and self-reflect. I mean,
Mm,
so you may not have all the answers, you may not know everything there is about yourself right now, but there's got to be a willingness to seek it out, right? To when something comes up, when something doesn't feel quite right, are you willing to slow down and investigate and reflect? I think it's when we start to get into those places where I don't like something I've done or whatever, it's easier just to kind of brush it under the rug and keep moving forward. And really, what Compassionate Dialogue Journey is saying is that it's an opportunity to slow down and actually peel back the layers of that and see where is this coming from? You know,
mm,
what is, and that really, you know, the second book is really the reason it's called the Compassionate Dialogue Journey is that it's a workbook to really begin to peel back those layers, to start slowing down enough to ask some difficult questions, to look at how you react in situations and what it would look like and what it would take for you to respond instead of react. And it really gets you to start to understand yourself in a way that maybe you've never slowed down to do before.
mm. It makes me think about sometimes, I mean, from a school space, but also from a professional learning space, often our students are our greatest teachers. But in this
Yeah.
stage, right, the conflict are our greatest teachers because it's putting up a mirror, finding some things out about ourselves and
Yeah.
to check in. So what do we have to then know about, I don't know if it's though, or you know, it's not a linear process. What do we have to know about other people to engage in compassionate dialogue?
So one thing is true is that you may not you may be the only person who knows about compassionate dialogue. So when you're engaging with others, it's likely that they don't have any idea what compassionate dialogue is.
Yeah.
So this is really about your practice, right?
Mm,
It's about how do you choose to show up in an interaction, right? I'm choosing to show up compassionately. I'm choosing to show up empathetically. I'm choosing to be curious. I'm choosing to inquire, right? And so, um, other people, it becomes less important because they're either going to respond to how I'm showing up or they're going to react to it. And I then have the choice to still carry the protocol through. So it's less about what the other person does and more about how do I hold myself accountable to be who I want to be,
yeah.
right? In the greater scheme of things, like how do I want to live my life? How do I want to show up in conflict? What is my best highest self asking me for?
Wow, I love it. I want to know, and this was I was thinking about this as you're talking about this, right? Is does and I mean I already know the answer is no from the conversation, but I still want to ask it.
Okay.
Does this mean because I think the audience and people that I know are going to be going, oh, I just be nice all the time.
Mhm.
Does this no? That's a, so talk about this niceness. Can we talk unpack niceness in this, or I'm just
Yeah,
curious, like what your thoughts about that are?
yeah. Nice. Nice is a detour, right?
Mm,
I'd rather someone be compassionate and honest with me than nice and dishonest. And I'm not saying that nice is always dishonest, but you get where I'm going, right? It's like,
yes, yeah.
I mean, people, it said, that nice, like I'm just trying to be nice, but you're not speaking your truth. You're talking behind my back. You're,
Mm,
blah, 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 blah. And so nice is a detour from us actually investigating, unpacking, and addressing the feelings that we're having, with in the interactions that we're having. And so I don't think nice is we're not looking for nice and compassion. We're looking for compassion and compassion. We're looking for empathy and compassion. We're looking for grace and compassion. Um, and if in the end it is perceived as nice, that's great,
mm,
right? But I think nice gets us in trouble because nice doesn't always, because of how people define nice, it doesn't actually allow them to be authentic.
And which communities are supposed to be nice, right? That's
Right.
what made me think too, like who is positioned to have to be nice because they're not heard. So made me think also when you're saying that about it goes back to I keep thinking the unleashed learning system about who we are matters and what that really means. Like if we really want to get these outcomes, who we are really matters. And I hear congruency.
Mm-hmm.
May not be your language, but that's what I'm hearing about. So the last question I think it's a really important question. And I think we've had a lot of conversations about this. What do we do when we mess up in those conversations, whatever messing up means? So you're trying to respond, but you find you react or you're triggered or whatever that is. And I know I'm not saying, I'm thinking about our conversation before about repairing because it
Mm-hmm.
might be revisiting it, right? We might mess up and have to do a do over. But just talk a little bit, if you would, about it doesn't go as well as we want, or we mess up in the way we approach this.
Yeah, and just like you said, you can always go back, right? We are going to mess up. That's what I can promise you. It's like I've written this book. I wrote this protocol 15 years ago, and there's days that I'm like, okay, that even my husband will say, he goes, "You need to use a protocol, Nancy." And it's become this kind of joke in our family.
Yeah.
So it's not if, it's when. And
Yeah.
so we have to give ourselves grace to know that, you know what, maybe something happened. Maybe someone cut me off. And before, I'm in reaction because I had to swear. And I'm doing a big cuss word and I'm yelling, that's not compassionate, but it's that moment. So I need to give myself grace to know I was scared, I was reacting, and I move on. Right. I think that where the invitation is I'm not going to chase this person down, and then flip them off and do all this stuff,
Yeah.
because then I'm way derailed. But I think that there are times where you are going to mess up. Someone's going to trigger you in such a way you're going to be caught off guard, and you may go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You may just go along with it because you really don't know what to do. But the beauty is that compassionate dialogue says you can always come back to it. So maybe you and I had something and I didn't say it in the moment because I was, I was confused or whatever, but I'm always able. It could be a day later, it could be a week later, it could be a month later, it could be a year or 10 years later. I can always come back to you and say, hey, you know what? I'm still thinking about that interaction we had the other day. And is it okay if we talk about it? Because it triggered some feelings, and now I'm actually able to identify what they are. So I'd like
Mm.
to talk about them, right? And so you can always once you recognize what that feeling is for you, and it then determines what you need to do. And so that interrupt can happen anytime. So it's never too late. Even if the person is not with us anymore, you
Mm.
still get to do the protocol on yourself to recognize what you're feeling, interrupt whatever patterns you're perpetuating because it's you feel like you're not able to have closure, and then
Mm.
you're able to repair it and hold yourself accountable for how you're going to move forward, right? So it's never too late.
Makes me think we say a lot that learning doesn't stick in real time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and also we talk a lot about positive progress, never perfection. So
Yeah.
sometimes, I'm thinking myself, but in that conversation, sometimes it takes me a day or two to kind of figure out what am I really feeling.
Right.
So if
Right.
if the quote confrontation happens, I got to go back to because I'm not really sure at the time, or if there's a
Right.
blow up or whatever. Sometimes it takes time to really, maybe it does take a year.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you just pointed out that I think is super important, and I mentioned it more in my first book, but a little bit in the second one, is that people process at different rates. There are
Mm.
so the protocol makes a lot of sense for me in real time because I, I'm a manifester. I think
Yes, you
kind of
are.
like that, right? Some people don't process that
Mhm.
fast, and that's something I've had to learn because there's always this tendency to project onto other people your traits. So my thing is like, why is it taking you so long? Because I've already got 10 different things and I'm waiting for you to get to catch up. And what I really have had to learn and humble myself is that everyone processes at a different rate. So there may be some people for whom the protocol will always be, the interrupt will always be later because they need time to figure out, am I offended? Well, like
Yes,
what's coming up for
yeah.
me? And so they may have to, their practice may be that it takes them a day or two to recognize, they know they know they feel something, but they don't know what it is, right? So the body tells you, and they just don't know what it is yet. And when they're able to name it, then they're able to move forward with the protocol. So I've had to understand that this works. The steps are the same, but the pace is going to depend on who you are and how you process. And so I think it behooves anybody who's thinking seriously about trying to use the protocol is to say, okay, how is it going to work best for me? What do I need? Am I that quick? I can think really quick on my feet, or am I the one that needs some significant time to process and then figure out those strategies? Because there's cues that you can make rote for yourself, kind of like if I need more time, I could say, wow, that triggered something. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I'm going to come back and talk to you. So what you've done is you've let that other person know that there's going to be a conversation coming back. Because I think sometimes what happens is that when people don't signal something's up in the moment, when they come back around, the other person's already forgotten about it, right? It's long gone. And then they're trying to figure out why you're hashing up something that happened a week ago. And so if you can signal that you're going to come back around to this, that can be helpful if you need more wait time.
Well, we'll come back around it because we'll show the old episode of Unleashed Learning TV with your first book. We'll put the link to the second book. We'll spread the word, and together, let's find ways to have more compassionate dialogue in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for that, and we don't, it's not about talking with people who think like you or agree with you. It's about having conversations with people who trigger you and figuring out how to also be compassionate with them and to seek to understand. That's how we're going to heal our fractured world right now.
Well, thanks for helping us do that, Nancy.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
We look forward to speaking to you soon.
Okay, take care, William.
So if you like this video, you should also watch this one.